my phone go off.
Before that, we start.
2-minute warning for halftime.
Right. Okay. And good morning to everybody. We are on air now. So thank you very much for joining us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and also Facebook, in Clubhouse as well, I believe. It's a very good morning here, actually, in Tokyo. We are both, no, I'm in Tokyo, Tim is in Atami, and Nicholas is in San Francisco. Our special guest today, you have probably met him online, on LinkedIn, and maybe you have already seen his book. Nicolas Gattic is, he has said that, he agreed actually to be our special guest speaker today. And today we're going to talk about a book he wrote, and that is going to be out. I think it's already out. No, Nicholas?
Yeah, it came out like 3 weeks ago.
Okay, 3 weeks ago, and you can find it online, which we started reading and are halfway through. So, good morning, Nicholas, and welcome to our podcast.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much indeed. And before we continue, I just wanted to say thank you very much to our first sponsor, that is Kanchu. You can find them at kanchu.com online. And of course, you can connect with James Howell online as well. He's available on LinkedIn. He's there most of the time. So if you feel like connecting with him there, please reach out and do so, or send him an email at james@kanchu.com. So Kanchu does buying and selling real estate in Yokohama. They do real estate investment and property management as well. Do not hesitate to reach out, because you can talk with them either in Japanese or in English. And so the language barrier is not there when you work with them. So thanks a lot for this. And now we continue with our guest speaker, with Nicholas. Well, Nicholas, we usually ask our guests to introduce themselves briefly and tell us from there, go into their Japan story. And I know that you have been here for a while. You spent a good time of your career in Japan as well. So, well, tell us about you first.
What brought you to Japan?
Yes.
What got you here?
What brought me to Japan? It was partly push and partly pull factor. I was completely stuck in my career and my life in San Francisco. So partly I had to get out of Dodge, as they say in the US.
Yeah.
I was an English teacher in San Francisco, which is a career that doesn't have much upward mobility. And I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I was teaching a class in San Francisco that had quite a few people, students from Tokyo. And people kept saying, hey, if you ever come to Japan, we can help you get set up. And because I was reluctant to go through one of the official programs, I had auditioned with, what was it? Not Nova, ECC. I had auditioned with ECC, and they didn't like the fact that I had experience. They wanted people fresh out of college. And so ECC was kind of like, we're not sure. We want someone who actually knows how to teach. So I realized I need to kind of build this up from the ground. So I came to Tokyo with basically my last salary in my pocket, almost no savings. And I met with a few students who were super helpful. And basically, I got the yellow pages and started calling up ESL schools in Tokyo.
Explain to our listeners who don't know what the yellow pages are. But what year are we talking about when you got here?
So I usually tell people it's not the yellow pages, actually. It was the internet. No more Rolodex, no more yellow pages.
Right.
It was 2009. So when people ask me, when were you in Tokyo? I basically say the Obama years. I was pretty much there for all of the Obama tenure. And I came back 2 weeks before Trump was elected in 2016. So my timing was impeccable for San Francisco. So then I started calling up schools in Tokyo, and it took me about a week or so to get a job. I was there on a tourist visa, 3 months, and nothing lined up. And within a week, I had a job. I called up a school, and they said, "Oh, can you work tomorrow?" And I said, "Sure." And I said, what about a visa? And they said, oh, we'll take care of everything. And that was how I got started. So that was much easier than I expected. And as it happens with Japan, the 1 year kind of, I don't know, holiday became 2 years, and then that became 3 years. And then after 7 years, I realized it's either going to be 25 more years or the rest of my life, or I'm going to leave now. Because it was hard to leave. As you probably know, it's Japan's a very comfortable place. It was very hard to leave. It was also kind of counterintuitive because it was so comfortable. But yeah, overall, I was there for almost 8 years. Started as an English teacher. Then I got more and more opportunities in the work, and I connected with Hitachi. They allowed me eventually to do executive coaching for them, which was an upgrade. And I started teaching college and working with Benesse, which is the large education.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Started doing curriculum for them. So it kind of branched out, and I felt like I kept getting opportunities offered. And suddenly I realized, oh my God, I can actually make money with this work. I can actually make money in education, which in the US
Yeah.
Mm.
For sure. Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't realize how relevant that was in 2009. So I got here I came in 77, but I got out of the Navy in 79. So let's call it the 80s, right? It was booming. It was before the bubble, right? So Japan was like riding high. Out of college, it wasn't hard to get a 6-figure salary. There were just opportunities everywhere, right? But even during college, like you, I started as an English teacher, right? But I first did it in the Navy just to make friends. That was my only motivation. And they paid me, but I didn't do it for that reason, right? And it was fun. It was educational because I talked to a lot of people one-on-one. You get, believe it or not, we got pretty deep into conversations, right? And I'm not saying I was a great English teacher, but I could talk with them and have fun with them and get to know them. And I did that for 7 years. And it got stale for me because I knew, like you said, there was no upward mobility. And I was like desperate to get out. And I took half my pay to go back to America to learn manufacturing. I just had to do anything. And that was the last thing I wanted to do. But I thought anything is better than English. I'm done with English. And it turned out to be a good long-term strategy. But then people would just come up to you on the trains and say, would you teach me English? I mean, like, it was everywhere. You didn't even have to try and you could get students. So even in 2009, it was probably a lot harder. And yet you managed to into opportunity.
There were a lot of people doing that work in 2009 for sure.
Okay.
A lot of people who had no idea how to teach. So like, you were a native speaker. Oh, you're a teacher now.
Yeah, me too. That was me. That described me to a T. I had no clue. Yeah.
So that was, I mean, especially at the conversation schools. I mean, I saw people.
Yeah.
I just kind of like, basically, they were native speakers. They would just talk all day to a captive audience. I'm not sure anybody learned anything, but that's how they. So after a year or two, it was definitely time to get out of the conversation schools. What was great about the conversation schools was that for somebody who came in completely green, like me, I could spend time with Japanese people, sometimes 6-7 hours a day. I would meet up to 10 people in one day. And the places where I was in Ikebukuro and Ginza. So my day started at 2 p.m. Junior high school boys. Then the middle-aged housewives came in from Saitama.
Sure.
And then 5 p.m., 6 p.m. first salary men started coming in. And then 8, 9 p.m. you get like musicians or hipsters or whatnot. And then Ginza would be bankers and finance people. So I got this beautiful
cross-section of
the population.
Right. Yeah.
And that was such a wonderful opportunity for me to get to know people, get to understand the society. It was like anthropology.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm a
Living.
good listener. So I would just, I'd be like, oh, you're a postman. Great. What's that like? Like, how do you enjoy it? Tell me. And then, oh, you run a bank. Okay. What do you enjoy about running a bank? So it was just great. And then after a little while, I realized that I had to completely change the way I was teaching English, because in the US, in San Francisco, a lot of my students were from Europe. And so that approach was a lot more discussion based.
Right.
They would come in and they were like, yeah, let's discuss the merits or the pros and cons of the death penalty. They were up for that. And then I realized, okay, this is not how you teach English at a conversation school in Japan.
Right.
But I don't know, it took a few months for me to pick that up and be like, okay, I'm not doing this right. I need to find different things to talk about to make this comfortable for people, to actually get something from these people.
Yeah.
So I found different topics, and I kind of let them come. You got to, Japanese people, you got to let them come. And when you create that space, they will eventually go into that space, but they need to see that space. You need to open that space for them.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what I learned to do, which is a great thing to learn, how to create space for other people in conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how to make that connection, because I got to know, like, I don't think I was a great teacher for people that didn't really want to learn. But if people were super motivated, and it was a small percentage of my students, like you just knew they were going to get good, and they were really motivated, and they had a good sense of humor. And then so I would work with them and really get to know them. And then they started telling me their hone, and I almost became a de facto therapist without the certification. Like, people would confess stuff to me because I'm not in their inner group.
Right.
They felt safe with me. I'm the guy Kokujin who's outside of their circle, and it'll never get back to them. And so I could just unload on this guy. So I had a lot of those students, and that's when you know you've gotten to their hone. You've gotten past the tatemaya, niceties, right? So for me, like you said, it's anthropology, and I would bounce ideas off them. Like I'd say, why do Japanese like to go out drinking? That was my assumption, but it was wrong. My buddy, he became my buddy. He goes like, we hate going out drinking. I go, what? Isn't that the way you tell people your hone? He goes, no. When I go out drinking, my boss says to me, tell me your hone. He goes, and I feel tremendous pressure now. And if I told him my real hone, I'd be in big trouble. So now I got to think on the spot some bullshit that sounds like my hone. And that's going to be convincing that it's my home without pissing them off. Like, so you get these nuanced takes on culture from the Japanese themselves, rather than me, the outsider, reading books or misinterpreting things or oversimplifying things, and making false assumptions. So to me, that was like a really beneficial aspect of that. Did you have any of that going on with you?
I learned very quickly that everything I had assumed I knew about Japan was completely wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Or everything you could say about Japan, you could also say the opposite. It just
The
depends on the
opposite,
situation, right?
Which is awesome. And it's perfect for fiction writing also.
Yes.
Because you're like, oh wow, we're all swimming in a sea of ambiguity. Oh, that's great. And it's like this Russian doll where you're like, oh, okay, now you open this one. Oh, this is it. No, wait a minute.
Then the next one, yes. Or like,
and I'm still learning after 45 years. I'm still discovering new stuff every day.
And so actually, people sometimes ask me, why did you decide to do a fiction book? Because I was a writer at the Japan Times, and that was going reasonably well. And then I had the choice. I wanted to write about my time in Japan, and that mostly happened when I left Japan. What happens to people who leave Japan after a long time, they often miss it. And so I wanted to write about Japan, but also I was excited to be back in the US. And that's why the stories in this book they're both talking about San Francisco and Tokyo, because I missed Tokyo and I was excited to be back in San Francisco. People ask me, why did you do a fiction book and not a nonfiction book, because I could have just kind of pulled together a bunch of articles from the Japan Times, stuff that was in good shape to be published. Like I would have half a book right there.
Right. Yeah.
And then I didn't want to be in that position where you kind of explain what it's like. Because then also there's a whole like Japan purity police that will be on your case and legally correct you. No, it's usually gaijin. It's the Japanese are like, whatever, like you didn't get that. But I came in contact with that, gaijin police writing for the Japan Times, and they're very unforgiving. It's like, you make a small mistake, you'll be reduced to that. So I thought, if I write in fiction, I can actually sit with the ambiguity, and I don't have to nail it. I can come from a perspective of cultural humility, not necessarily cultural competence or even mastery.
Right. Yeah.
I can put a foreigner into Tokyo and describe what this person sees, and that's valid because it's just this person.
Yes.
Their perception, whether they're right or wrong, you're looking at it through their filters, right?
Yeah. And that was very liberating.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Plus, it's easier to teach culture when you wrap them in a story. There's so many points you can make off a story, and those are the things people remember. I don't remember any of the dry stuff I read as an anthropology student, but I remember all the stories. And like Robert Whiting, I love the way that guy writes because he's a storyteller, but you learn so much culture through his books, So I love the idea that you made fiction.
A lot of the stories are also an ability to tap into the humor.
Right. Exactly.
And when there's friction, you don't have to take sides. You're just like, okay, here's an American. He's being an American. What else would he be? Here's a Japanese.
He doesn't know any better.
He doesn't know anything else. Here's a Japanese person being Japanese, and they interact, and here's what happens. And this is, I think, something I appreciate about your writing, Tim, where you're just kind of like taking the observer view, and you're just like, this is what happened. It's almost like a chemical reaction. We have this.
I'm not judging which is better or worse. I'm just, this is it. This is what's,
You put these elements together, and then, this works, and this doesn't work so well.
Yeah.
But I remember early on writing for the Japan Times, they would get letters, and at some point somebody said, this guy, Gattic, like, whose side is he on?
that tells so much about that person.
Yeah, because you always have to take sides, right? It's
antagonistic. He's framing it in antagonistic terms rather than how do you have fun and learn together. It's like us versus them. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. So it's sad too, though.
Well, the fact that he was asking with me that I was doing the right thing.
Right. It just justified it was a badge. You wore it as a badge of pride.
That's exactly where you want to be as a good fiction writer.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm like, I'm doing the right thing. This guy's confused. Great.
Yes.
Working very well for me.
We don't share the same values.
Yeah. No, the good thing I see there is that when people are confused, they tend to think about the issue at hand, right? And that's what we want more people to do, basically. And it doesn't happen so often nowadays as it used to, I believe, because of, how the social media have wired our minds to be either white or black and to look only for these two colors. To
binary framing.
Yes, the binary framing. But if you can confuse people and really stimulate their thinking process, then I think that it's already a success in itself.
And wander into the gray areas, into the nuanced areas.
The nuances, yes. Yeah.
That's what fiction ideally wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
You're right, Maya. It's gotten more difficult. Also in terms of marketing. So the easiest way, for example, to get Amazon reviews is write a book based on identity. And then your first 50 reviewers will not be reviewing the merit of the book. They will respond from an identity perspective. They identify with that identity, or they will comment on the identity. So you get identity-based comments. less so
Oh,
than literary merit contents.
Yeah.
right.
And that's it's actually really hard to position a book that's not based on identity these days.
That's
Yeah.
so interesting. That wasn't even on my radar.
No.
If you look at fiction releases, if you look at the first 50 reviews, it's usually people like, this person's writing about the Cambodian refugee experience, and that's totally like my grandparents. I totally rang a bell. They'll respond to that.
Oh,
And then the next is like, a white liberal who's like, it was so great to learn about the Cambodian refugee experience in the 70s. So it's that conversation. It's picking up a social media conversation rather than, wow, this writer really knows how to write dialogue.
right.
Okay, Nick, let me ask you this, though. Looking at it in a positive way, I feel like right now writing about Japan gives you an edge, maybe. Is there an angle where there just seems so much interest now in this country?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that maybe as some way to differentiate yourself?
So you are completely right in that there's a lot of interest in Japan.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, I'm not an expert, but I think there's probably peak interest in Japanese content. I'm amazed how much Japanese content there's on Netflix, for example. I think Japanese writers I'm pretty sure I just saw that they're the most translated fiction writers these days. So Japanese storytellers are getting a lot of attention in the West.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different game for Westerners to tell stories about Japan. I think a great example is Shogun was just retold from the Japanese perspective, because we were kind of retiring the James Clavell, white man in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so another reason why I didn't want to do a nonfiction book was like, nobody cares these days about the adventures of a white man from the US and Tokyo. That's actually really, really hard to pull off these days. It was really, really hard for me to get this book published because a lot of agents told me, these stories are great, but we really think we might get in trouble with representation because you're a white man telling stories about Japanese characters.
Yeah.
With like Japanese main characters and even like Japanese women. And that goes closer to an area that's dynamite, which is representation and getting canceled on X.
Yeah.
Agents said this to me. I said, one agent, like straight up, she was like, "Are you Japanese?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "Okay, can't do this. Next."
Oh, it's interesting.
It is, a sad state of affairs, I would say. But yeah, like they immediately write you, just say you cannot do that.
Yeah, it's hard.
And it's not because of, as you say, literary merit. It's because of identity politics and how
it's
the society thinks nowadays.
Yeah.
I got this close to getting published with Tuttle. The senior editor read the whole book, loved the book. She said, "These stories are great. I want to do this." Not sure the publishing committee, they have like, I don't know, a group of people who decide. She said, "You might get into trouble because of representation." And then she actually asked me, she said, "Could you write 2 more stories where you have an American female main character and 1 story with no Japanese women?"
Oh, wow.
So you have a little balance.
Right.
I did that, added 2 more stories. And by the way, once you make changes to please an editor, what always happens is they end up saying no anyway, even after you do it. So I did
creativity killer. Oh,
I added 2 stories, and then they still said no. And the reason was we don't do a lot of contemporary fiction, and I think that was code for we don't want to wade into that territory. I ask, is there anything wrong with the stories, in the portrays, in the way it's written? She's no, there's nothing wrong with that. I think this is a process and it's evolving.
Yeah.
I like to think we are.
Moving past it maybe a little bit,
Yeah.
dare I say.
I hope you're right, and
No,
I
I
hope
don't know. But maybe it's hard to see trends when you're in the middle of it.
it is, yeah, it is. But yeah, we definitely, I think for the sake of society, we need to move past this trend because with this, we're going nowhere. The gap between different groups in society is just widening, and there is nothing to gain from that.
I think we're going in the wrong direction. And call me
Mhm.
crazy, but I wish we could be reducing labels to just human. And
Right.
each person's label is their name. And we take them for what they're worth as individual human beings. I mean, to me, I know it's a vision that might never be achieved, but that should be an aspiration, I feel like, where we're
Yeah.
not worried about gender, we're not worried about, skin color. We're not worried. We just everybody treats each other as individuals. We're human. That's how
Indeed. Yeah.
you call me crazy, but
That
am I thinking
sounds
wrong that maybe we're going in the
incredibly
wrong
civilized
direction?
and evolved.
We're creating more labels, and now you got a micro thing. Everybody's got their own label now on
Yeah,
that infinite spectrum. Like, where does it stop? You
I
know?
do think. I mean, I think definitely on the liberal side of things, people are still trying to figure out what the last election meant in terms of where the country is at.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So we have created labels like Latinx that a lot of Latinos
Don't
do
like a
with.
very small
Like,
percent. Right.
so
Yeah.
what does that mean?
How far have we
Yeah.
gone?
What
Yeah.
what does that mean?
Yeah.
Uh, for
Yeah.
my situation, I know that I had agents who were Asian Americans who would say, only Asians should write about Asians. And I,
Oh,
I understand. Oh, did you need a break?
no, please.
2 minute
Yeah.
warning. So please
Yeah.
finish.
Okay, got
Yeah.
it. I understand where that comes from. I understand that representation
I do. I
matters.
do too. Yeah.
It was done horribly badly
Yeah.
for generations. And so I think
I agree.
it's really important to pay attention to who represents whom.
I agree. I agree.
My stories are about interactions. And this is something that, like, if they tell you write about what you know, I have interacted with Japanese people for 20 plus years.
Yes.
Like, that is what I know. That is my lane. You tell me stay in your lane, that is my lane. I don't have any other lane to go to.
Right. Me too. Yeah. Me
Yeah.
too. Maya too. I mean,
Me too. Yeah.
we're in that club,
No, that is my lane. You tell me stay in your lane. Like, I am firmly in my lane.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, sorry, I don't want to, to sigh on screen because it shows just helplessness and so on. And I definitely, yes, I definitely hope that we're going to get out of this trend and eventually overcome it. So for the best, and for the better of the communities we live in, for the better of the society as a whole. But before that, okay, before we continue, I want to once again bring our other sponsor, on screen and say thank you to Houze. You can find them at www.houze.co.jp, and you can also connect with them online through the webmasters at houze.co.jp. But also another thing is that you can talk with them again either in English or in Japanese. They do custom home design and construction. They do commercial building construction. And of course, Hannah will be there when you need them to work with you. So they will customize their services to you. You can find also their channel on YouTube and see some of their works there, the projects they have completed. And since we have worked with them, we are really happy to be able to represent them here, to give them this screen time. Great. And then, well, let's go back to our conversation now. So, Nicholas,
Yeah,
sorry for
I
interrupting
wanted
you.
to make one quick point that I
Yeah,
think I could speak for all of us when we say we don't divide people. Our mission, I know yours, Maya, and mine is bringing people together. Like, that's what we're trying to do.
yeah,
And when you see things that are having the opposite effect, it can be disheartening, but it also makes our mission even more important. So I just want to sneak in that point.
Very much so. And yes, one of the things that has always bothered me here in Japan when I meet foreigners is that the first, the attitude or the approach is us versus them.
Yeah.
And when you get into this mindset, it's always difficult to actually get to understand the other side's motivations and the reasons for how things are done, right? So it's really important, I believe, to just try to be open and don't think about this us versus them, or our way of doing things is better or whatever, because it's just different. It's not about
And the cure is interaction, as Nicholas said earlier. Interactions.
interactions. Yeah.
That's the cure. That's the medicine. You have to
Yes.
interact
Right.
in a
Yeah.
meaningful way.
So that's actually a great. I've thought about advice for people who might be interested in writing about, for example, your audience, about Japanese people, as a non-Japanese person. And I think the first component is you have to come in with love for the people that you write about,
For
and
sure.
and that entails respect and appreciation.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You got to come from that. You can't really write about people if there's not a place where you just like them, and you can find fault with certain things, and certain things can drive you crazy. That's part of cultural interactions too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you have to come. It starts with love. And if you're not starting there, if you start with like settling scores or winning the game, then you're not doing it right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was. I have heard it from Timothy Langley actually, but it could be somebody else's quote. I don't know. So this is just there is a reservation there. But well, the things that you love about Japan are also the things that drive you crazy here, right? So, and I think it is very true. And as long as we accept this, let's say, this reality, so it's very difficult to see the culture, to see the people, and to think about everything that is happening here from a stance of, let's say, superiority or no, or whatever. So it is really good to basically to think that we're just the same people, and yeah, we want the same things at the end of the day,
That is
even
something
though
of
yeah.
fiction that I learned from the great writer E.M. Foster, who wrote about India, Passage to India, which is it's exactly 100 years old. And that is still to this day almost like a manual on how to write about a foreign culture as a Western European, or just as a Westerner.
All right.
Yeah.
It's really helpful because you see the book and you see Foster liked India. He liked this. And it's not this wide-eyed, oh, everything's great, this naive kind of, oh, he's new here, he doesn't know how this works. No, he knew how it worked. He could describe things that drove him crazy, but it was this underlying love for the place was
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
there. And so that's a great book to get kind of pointers on how to do that. Forster also had another component of writing about other cultures, which is know your own place, self-awareness.
Yeah.
Who are
Know
you?
your own culture. Know yourself.
Yeah.
Know your own values.
Yeah.
Your authentic self. Yeah.
Know the power dynamic
Hmm.
between white people, whether it's from Europe or the US, and Japanese people. There's a very intricate power dynamic
Yeah.
that is also sometimes renegotiated in interactions or challenged.
Yeah.
And it needs very solid self-awareness, especially for white people, to understand who we are in that dynamic and what buttons we may be pushing.
Right.
And yeah.
It's in a lot of my stories. That is the stuff
Yeah.
of fiction. That is the juice where it's like, oh, we just pushed a button. Let's watch that play out.
Right.
That makes it interesting. You throw them into a situation, and it's almost like the dialogue almost writes itself. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? When you just so to me, the challenge, and I really didn't start realizing this till like 10 years ago, I knew it intuitively, but when I first got here, like I was totally clueless. I think I'm embarrassed by some of the stuff I did back then. When I think about it, I wish I could go back and counsel myself, you know. But and then I went through a phase where I almost got too Japanese. Like, and I wasn't conscious. I wasn't trying to be Japanese, but it was kind of creepy now when I think about it. And I go back to America, and everyone's like looking at me like I'm this weird foreigner. You know, I've been in Japan for 10 years, right? And so I had to balance it, and I had to find my own sweet spot. Like, okay, yeah, I don't. That's not me behaving that way. But there were a lot of things I loved about Japan, and like my process has been this, most of it unconscious, trying to integrate my authentic self. And that means I've been trying to discover who I am for a very long time, and I still am. But I know better than I used to. And so knowing yourself, as you said, your authentic self, your own culture, self-awareness, but also being able to change and be flexible and finding, this is what my word, finding your cross-cultural sweet spot where you're authentic, but you've adjusted and can make connections. You can make them smile, laugh, get in conversation, make close friends. To me, that's what language is for. That's the reason I learned Japanese. I want to make friends.
Yeah.
I love that
Yeah.
phrasing, finding your cross-cultural spot.
It's an ongoing journey.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, and when I
And
see foreigners acting too Japanese, I'm like, I cringe a little bit. Like, come on, that's not really you. Be authentic, you know, be natural. And
Yeah.
anyway, that's because I'm a curmudgeon.
Yes, I have to say that I'm guilty of that. I was guilty of that, and basically I have been told, Maya, kimochi warui ne. So,
And they mean
like,
it.
so
They're
they,
joking, but
yes,
they mean it.
yes. And then I realized that basically, to me, it was fun to hear that and understand that this flexibility, I could be that flexible. But at the same time, I needed to bounce back and really find that sweet spot at the end. And actually finding that sweet spot, understanding the power dynamics between the local population and you as a foreigner here is very important, and it can be a strategic strength actually in you achieving your goals in Japan, because knowing what you can do and what you cannot do is very important so that you can build that strategy. And I say strategy, but basically build or understand what how you can approach every matter and how you can achieve what you have in mind. And it's difficult. I always feel kind of sorry for the people who come here and they start butting their heads into the wall and say, why don't they do this, or why don't they do that, and I want to achieve this, and it will be so much better if they do things our way. And it's really funny because it's like you're running in circles without being able to achieve anything, also alienating your local colleagues in the process.
And the
And
faster you try to go, the slower things happen.
Yes.
exactly, yes.
The beauty of my
Passive
situation was that
aggressively.
I was able to come back to the US and have a Japanese network here in San Francisco, where I see Japanese expats go through these negotiations and that process. And that's fascinating.
I did that too, yeah.
And then you realize, oh, this part of my experience is just expat experience. It's the honeymoon phase, then the total resistance rejection phase, and then the negotiation phase. Japanese people in the US tend to obviously butt heads less because they tend to just say, okay, this is really strange, but it's America, shogunai. That's how they do things here. They're just,
what are you gonna do?
so there's less of a missionary desire to save America from itself. I think as
right.
as gaijin in
You give
Japan, we often try to save the Japanese from Japan. Japanese in America tend to not try that. They're like, this is your game. This is your show here.
Exactly. We're just visitors.
We're just watching the show. But there's a negotiation in terms of how American Japanese people want to become. And that's also part of the stories. I write about that process.
Yeah.
Japanese kind of watch each other as to where they are on the assimilation stage. and how American they become when they're in the US.
Yeah.
Yes.
These people have very interesting lives in the US. It's very diverse. They do really cool things. They often kind of blossom. If they survive like a 6 to 12 month period where it's like make or break, and if you're still around, then you have what it takes. And then they often develop interesting lives. You really build interesting lives.
Yeah.
So that has been really fascinating for me to see here. But they also are kind of like judging, oh, wow, she's too American. And then the face is always like, she can never go back. Right.
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 Organ
Yes.
rejection. Like if you go back to Japan, like the mother host will not accept this organ anymore. Like you cannot, you're done. Okay.
Except there's one caveat for that, and that is if you make it to your 60s, you can come back now because people just say, "Oh, she's a bachan, she can do whatever she wants." But
Right.
you got to get to that stage
Yeah.
of life, you know.
But also, it may be possible to come back, but it would require coming back and once again integrating into the
Readjusting.
the Japanese society will require readjustment again, which is,
Who wants
in
to
itself,
climb back into the pressure cooker?
yes, yes. Well,
You
but
know?
still, I know people who have decided to come back from the United States, and I see them going through this readjustment period and through the reverse culture shock this
Yeah.
time. So, and it's not an easy process.
It's
But that's how it
constricting, I
is.
think.
It is,
To them,
yes.
it might, especially if you're a woman, I think, you know.
Hmm. For women, it's more difficult, I think.
Yeah, it's much more,
Yeah.
So women here, I think, tend to
blossom.
Yeah.
A lot
Yeah.
of them blossom. I saw
Right.
it
Yes.
with my own
Yes.
eyes.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
they're fun. They're great.
It's.
They have
I agree.
active
Yeah.
active lives. They do all kinds of stuff. They're
Right.
not the stereotype of Japanese women. They do their own
Right.
thing. They know what they want. They're street smart. They know the game, and that's really fun. It's like a great anthropological experiment. You're like, oh, we take
Right.
this species and put it into this environment, and wow, they grow wings. So that's
Yes.
interesting. And that's also something I wanted to write about because it tells us something both about the Japanese, but also about the US. It allowed me to write about San Francisco from a perspective of enchantment, the enchantment of the newcomer, the foreigner, the outsider. And it allowed me to point out the things that are funny or maybe
Yeah.
strange about US culture
Right.
to outsiders. And that's kind of the place where I'm the most comfortable. That to me is very natural.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, right?
Yeah. If you don't mind me going a little bit deeper, into the stories you wrote. So my impression, honestly, I don't read much, fiction nowadays because of my work and everything. So I concentrate more on studying things. But, and your book has been the first in several years for me, actually. But I love how I love everything about it. First of all, I love that it is stories, it is short stories. So I do not have to spend, a whole, let's say, half a week on the book. So I start the story and I finish it very quickly. And at the same time, while I read the story, I admire the language and the expression. I loved how you actually really integrated all that nuance and the cultural nuance as well. It was so beautiful in a very relaxed way. And this is, last night I read one of the stories before going to bed, and it is such a beautiful way to actually go to sleep because you read the story and your mind is at peace. But at the same time, while it is at peace, I still kept wondering, okay, so what happened? What happened afterwards? Because yes, the stories I read, and especially the first one was like, okay, so what happened next? You gave a hint of what the real development was, but it was just a hint, and we don't know whether that hint would turn out to be true or not, right? Because it sounds like a real life story, and in life you never know what the next step
Yeah.
is. And
My
it,
Japanese wife loves those ambiguous kind of endings.
yeah,
Movies and like she's like, and if it's not that way, she's disappointed. Oh, I wish they would have left it to our imagination.
yeah, we don't want the definitive end of the story, but at the
They
same
like to
time,
live in
yes,
the
right?
ambiguity
Yes,
space,
yes,
like Nicholas said.
yes.
I
But
learned that from
yeah,
Japanese writers.
Right. I figured you did. Me
There,
yeah,
too.
there's some American storytellers who can do this.
I agree.
Um, I think David Lynch, who just passed, was a filmmaker who was very comfortable in the ambiguous.
Yeah.
But the Japanese, I think, just they own.
It's a lifestyle.
And yeah,
yeah,
and I remember I was fresh in Japan and I was reading a Tanizaki novel. Some prefer nettles, and in the end, the main female character goes into the bedroom of a male character. And she just walks towards the door. The end.
Anyway,
Like,
that's beautiful.
whoa,
I love it.
whoa.
right.
Right.
One of those moments where, like, I didn't know you could do that.
And it leaves the door open for a sequel too.
So you're like, wait a
Yeah,
minute, like this is this okay? Like nothing's wrapped up.
Yeah.
Are they back
Yeah.
together? Is she just did she leave her handkerchief there or what is this?
Yeah.
The comfort that the Japanese have with that. It's more than
That ambiguity.
it's almost like a comfort. It's like, yeah, this is nice.
Right.
yeah,
That was great. And short stories are great for that because you can kind of like quickly go into a moment and then quickly remove yourself. And it's a snapshot.
yeah.
Snapshot in time.
It is, yes.
You don't have to be
Photograph.
Exactly. Yes, it's a snapshot shot in time. And I also wanted to say that those snapshots, you manage to get, it's a snapshot, but at the same time, you manage to get several of them in one short story, right? By bringing the character or the character's memories into the story. And this adds so many layers, different layers to the story, even though you're telling the story from the perspective of that one character. Still, there is so much complexity there. And I love that too. And of course, once again, the language. Wow, it's so beautiful. So I don't know. I really think that many people should actually get their hands on your book and read it.
Thank you so
Not
much.
just once,
Uh,
but more than that.
I love language, and I think in language, and I was a musician first, and so I pay a lot of attention to sound. There are certain words that I would never put into an English sentence just because they just don't sound right to me.
Mm-hmm.
And rhythms. There's
Rhythms.
rhythms to writing.
Yeah. Cadences, the way a paragraph flows, the way a word lands on a sentence. These are all things I think about. And makes me very happy when readers notice these things because they're very deliberate.
I think they feel them more than they notice.
Yeah, it's more on an emotional level rather than, just this aware. Of course, you become aware. I became aware while I was half through the first story. Because to me, the paragraphs, how you weaved, the memories and everything there, it felt like an embroidery
Oh, yeah.
piece.
Nice.
So
Yes.
you're saying about your relationship with fiction, I think this happens to a lot of people. Less and less people are reading fiction.
Yeah.
Certainly literary. I think genre fiction is doing okay. Young adult novels, no matter how poorly written, are selling like gangbusters.
Oh, interesting.
So if you ever want to make money writing fiction, young adult is the way to go.
Young adult. Good to know.
Sci-fi sells. Fantasy sells. You could probably write Western movies or noir thrillers spy thrillers. The problem with literary fiction is that men have all but stopped reading literary fiction. So if you're writing literary fiction in 2025 now, you are writing for an audience that is predominantly women, And so you have to keep that in mind. So if you want to write like Ernest Hemingway or Philip Roth, like from a very, very strong masculine point of view, you might want to self-publish. There's currently no taste for that. I think a lot of people look to fiction also to learn something. That's what I keep hearing. People say, I read to learn, and people say, I don't learn anything from literary fiction. I think I've learned so much about people from literary fiction.
Right, yeah.
But I think, especially nowadays, people want more than just be entertained from fiction. So I've been very careful about the lessons or the ideas about Japanese culture, how much I put in there. So it's a doses where I want to put something in there to make people feel like they're learning something, but I don't want to be didactic. I don't want to be teaching, and I don't want to overload it with Japanese culture insights. So you have to really get the mixture right.
And the story has to suggest a lot of it rather than hit you over the head with it. It's funny. You mentioned like young adult. And I just never thought of this before, but that might really be a good niche, because I think getting them young there's an advantage to, and if you could like somehow write about culture aimed at young adults, somebody comes as an exchange student or something, or, that might be an idea
I'm not even sure who the audience is for young adult.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know either. I'm just talking out my butt.
Yeah. I could imagine the audience is significantly older. But honestly, I don't know who's reading the stuff, but it sells.
Yeah.
So, but you're right in that.
Anime fantasy.
You're right in that the culture stuff ideally is just part of the story. It has to be organic. It's if you read a Japanese novel from like the 1950s, the Showa is on every page, but they're not explaining Showa.
Yeah,
it's in the way people talk. Right now, there's a show on Netflix, the new Koreera show. What is it, Azura maybe? And it's set in the 1970s.
I saw it. Yeah.
It has a strong 70s feel, but it's more like in the cultural norms, maybe the way people dress. But it never hits you over the head like we're in the 70s. But it's constant. You have a constant, strong sense of.
You can have music in the background from that era. Yeah. This is my only problem with the whole Showa labeling. Showa was a long era, and you can't, like, the early Showa and the mid Showa and the late Showa are like three. There's more.
Different
I guess there's a
periods,
lot of ways to slice it. And so when I hear Showa, I'm like, okay, I was here during Showa, the 70s, 80s, but what's Showa really?
It's funny, yeah. It tends to become reduced to the 50s when really it was so much.
I guess. Yeah. That's my only pet peeve, Showa. And oh, by the way, and you're a good writer. You're a great writer. So I just want to make a point about the rhythm. Rhythms that they're very subtle, but you'll have a short sentence, but then you might have a longer sentence.
Yeah.
And it's just about rhythm, right? That's the one. This is another pet peeve. This is the curmudgeon coming out. When I see broetry on LinkedIn, the stilted one line space, I cringe for a couple of reasons. One, it shows a lack of imagination. And two, it's a stilted cadence. And I want somebody to bring me in a rhythm, to carry me into a rhythm and to pull me in. And the stilted, it just bugs me. That's the curmudgeon. And God bless y'all. You have a right to do it, folks. If you love the broetry, knock yourself out.
I actually have issues with the term broetry because A, it's nothing near poetry, and B, it's not only bros who are doing it, right? So it's
right. No, everybody's doing it now, right?
To me, it's just bad LinkedIn
I
style.
didn't think of that name. I learned that from Jason Ball. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
LinkedIn. It's hard. It's social media is a tough place to appreciate good writing.
Yeah. But there's some good writers out there that I like. like to follow. And
Yes.
by the way, James Howell is one. He's a great writer.
He is a great writer,
You know,
yes.
and there are some that really, it's
Yeah.
almost poetic, you know, but they stand out because that's not the norm on
I think
LinkedIn.
the broderie is what we call the short, what is it? The declarative sentences. It's like this, and like this, and it's like this. And that,
And then they tie it together with a deep point. You know?
yeah. How does this relate to sales? Oh, here's how. I mean, that partly comes from Hemingway because he had, the short declarative like sentences, like the room was empty, the booze was strong. But I mean, Hemingway was a great writer to put that together into a paragraph that was music.
Right.
I do think that we are at a time where people are paying less attention to style. I don't see a lot of new novels come out that have a beautiful style. Actually, one of the last fiction writers that blew me away was a Vietnamese American who wrote The Sympathizer, Viet Thanh Nguyen. The Sympathizer was beautifully written, where you just you're stunned by the beauty of the language. That is part of fiction writing for me, and that's what I strive for. I think with so much language now being AI generated, I don't know if beautiful language will stand out more and more, or if it will in value. I don't know where that's going.
Or if my generation dies off and there's no one more left to appreciate it,
I don't know. I would love to see how young people respond to beautiful writing. Can they pick up on it? Do they feel it? Do they appreciate it?
Can they pay attention to it long enough?
Yeah.
To feel.
I don't know. We are really on a new course, and fiction writing is in a kind of a strange place where it can go in different ways, and I think nobody knows.
Yeah.
It's a very different game from what it was 20 years ago. Very different.
Yeah, it is. But hopefully there will be a bounce back again to the beautiful expression of of anything, and especially beautiful writing, because I believe that, as you said, there are still books that stand out. The question, though, is how you entice the younger generations into reading them.
Marketing it, yeah.
Right? And then that point will come inevitably. I'm sure that it will. Oh, but it may take, some figuring out and some time.
But to that point, in closing, Nicolas, tell us, everybody, where they can buy your book. What are the websites? This is your pitch, my friend.
Oh, well, the book's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
The title, give the title again.
The title is A Good Place to Leave a Lover.
That's a great title. I love
It's the title of the first story, where an American woman is sitting in a park in Tokyo, and she's waiting for her Japanese boyfriend to show up because she wants to break up with him. And he never shows.
No.
This is the premise of the first story. I wanted the sense of place in the title because all the stories, whether they're set in Tokyo or in San Francisco, have a strong sense of place.
I love that concept, sense of place.
Yeah. So that's hence the title. So as anybody who Googles my name or A Good Place to Leave a Lover will see the book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. It's also available in Japan. So if you go to the Japanese Amazon, it actually is printed in Japan. I don't know how my publisher pulled that off.
Oh, nice.
I am working on a Japanese translation. I do think that Japanese audiences might be interested in reading this in Japanese. So I'm looking for a Japanese publisher. And I'm trying to get a reading together for later this year in Tokyo. So should that happen, I will
let us know.
Let us know. Yes.
We'll get the word out. We'll get the word out for you as best we can.
Yes.
Well, that's great. And here we are. It's 9:00. Perfect.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you so very much. Yes.
A professional Nick. He did it for us, Nicolas. So
my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we would love to have you again, once again, and talk about the audiences, the people who buy your book. So maybe that will be a glimpse into how, the trends are going, the trends are moving. So let's think about this. and yes, talk about this again. And well, thanks a lot to everybody who stayed with us on LinkedIn. Also,
Thank you.
YouTube.
Have a great day, everybody.
Yes.
Enjoy this beautiful Wednesday, or wherever you are, Thursday, for if you're in the U.S. And Nicholas, have a great day. Let's stay in touch. Let's do this again.
Let's do this again. Yes.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
All right, man.
Thank you. And a shout out to our sponsors once again.